Last time I talked about Double Dragon on this channel, I did not actually beat it, or more specifically, I couldn't beat it consistently. Like, after beating it last night and doing another playthrough today, I am at the point where I can consistently get through Double Dragon. So that kind of means that I've mastered the game. I know everything about it. This is a favorite of mine. And now I think I can safely say that, yeah, this is one of my favorite NES games. This is one of my favorite beat 'em ups of all time. This is, to me, an all time classic. And it's kind of a shame that younger players don't really know Double Dragon or care about Double Dragon or have heard of it. This game is 39 years old this year, okay? This game will be 40 next year. So the simple fact of the matter is that the fact that I, even after all this time, have consistently come back and tried to beat this game and eventually managed it just goes to show you just how iconic it is, how memorable it is, and just how timeless it is. Like, I do think this is one of those NES games that's probably going to stand the test of time, alongside Super Mario Bros. And The Legend of Zelda. I have a very hard time thinking of any NES game that's as fun to come back to and play again as Double Dragon. I just every time I play this one, I'm just very, very surprised at just the pacing, the structure, the action, the versatility, like the unique sequences. Like, it's very interesting to me, like, how much variety you get in this game, because no two level is the same. You're going through caves, you're going through ruins, you're going through, like, a city, a construction site, you're climbing ladders, you're jumping over pits, you're, like, throwing people, like, into those pits. It's so well rounded, entertaining, and just endlessly enjoyable. This is classic video gaming at its finest, and I really hope at some point that this game has some kind of resurgence among younger players, the same way that Columbo had a resurgence among younger viewers due to, like, being far more intelligent and engaging than modern shows or movies. Like, this is something that I think is a really interesting experience, because this is an arcade game in the console format, right? Like, these days, most people just kind of have this feeling that, like, yeah, to beat a game, all you have to do is spend a lot of time with it. You'll level up, you'll get to that point, you'll figure everything out eventually. Like, no, like, Double Dragon is really interesting, where it's a relatively short experience, where it's like, maybe 20 minutes long, 20, 30 minutes long. Like, it's very, very short. It's on the surface something that should be like a really short, brief playthrough, but, like, if you're playing it for the first time, if you're grinding through it, if you're learning the ins and outs of, like, where to go and what to do, like, you are going to make a lot of mistakes that cost you. And when you make enough mistakes, when you lose enough lives, you do get set back to the beginning. So this is an example of old school arcade game design, in which you are punished with having to play the entire game again if you make enough mistakes. And the game is just hard enough where you'll make a lot of progress every single time and then inevitably fail on something relatively innocuous. There have been plenty of times in my playthrough where, like, I've fallen in pits, or I got killed by an enemy. I've walked off the stage a couple of times. In this footage, you'll see me, like, die twice against the same group of abobos. Not that, like, I don't know how to handle them, but, like, I kind of zoned out while I was playing this, and didn't necessarily take them seriously. Because I had done it so many times before. And that's the really interesting thing about this. Like, no matter how good you get at this game, you have to stay engaged if you're going to beat it. If you're going to beat Double Dragon, you're going to have to learn everything about every enemy encounter, every area. You have to be prepared for every contingency. You can't be allowed to make any kind of mistake. You can't, like, experiment too much. Like, actually, you do have to experiment, right? You do have to figure out what works and what doesn't. But, when you inevitably screw up, you are going to die, and you are going to have to go back to the beginning and play again. So, doing that over and over again, it gets kind of grating. It does. But then you start learning it, and then you start, like, appreciating the design philosophy, because this is a game that expects you to play by its rules. It expects you to grow and evolve, and it really does quite a lot to keep you engaged throughout. Like, as I said, like, no two rooms in this game, and like no two enemy encounters are the same. You fight the same core group of enemies over and over again, but in different situations. Sometimes they have weapons, sometimes, like, there's environmental hazards you can use to your advantage, or they can use against you. Like, every room in this game just feels like very distinct and has its own thing to offer. It's so interesting playing through this game and seeing, like, the experience people have had with it, and, like, where they get filtered and where they get fed up. I think most people could get through, like, mission 1 and 2 very quickly, but inevitably are going to struggle at some point in mission 3. You get exposed to endless caverns, right? You get exposed to, like, more abobos. You get exposed to, like, more of a maze-like structure. Like, it takes you a while to figure out exactly what you're supposed to do in Double Dragon, but once it all comes together, once you get to the final gauntlet at the end and you, like, confront your brother, who seems to be behind everything in this version of the game, like, what you get is one of the most pivotal, emotional, like, amazing final confrontations in video games. Like, I got downright emotional, like, beating this game after such a long period of grinding. Like, it's like, it was such a good old school experience, and, like, going through it again and, like, mastering it, like, just blasting through the entire thing, knowing everything about it, like, consistently getting to the point where, like, I can get to, at the very least, the gauntlet at the end. If you have an extra life at the gauntlet, like, if you beat the machine gun guy, you do start at Jimmy. So if you have an extra life and you can get through Willie, you've pretty much beaten the game. So, like, Jimmy is not hard, by the way. But, like, it's like, playing this game is just so much fun. Like, it actually challenges you. It actually pushes you to improve, and it actually does feel very, very satisfying when you do clear everything and get Marion at the end. It's just like, it really is just an iconic Nintendo game that I really wish got more appreciation. Because every single time, like, a new Double Dragon product gets announced, it's always very poorly received, right? I know Double Dragon 4 people didn't like. I love that one, but a lot of people spurged about it. And like, they keep experimenting with weird stuff that nobody cares about. Like, the roguelike one, and I think they recently did some kind of, like, remake of this, which I have not played. But, like, you look at, like, where Double Dragon is now, and, like, it really feels like this really should have grown into a major Nintendo IP. Like, this is the beat 'em up game. When I compare this to, like, Final Fight or, like, Streets of Rage or something, like, this is the game that I think kind of surpasses those. When I compare it to, like, TMNT and, like, more of the 16-bit arcade era, like, I feel like this game is actually a lot better because it's not just about beating people up. It does take strategy. You do have, like, a level up mechanic in which you, like, go through the game and, like, unlock more moves throughout. You do have, like, you do have to think about, like, different enemy confrontations, because, like, some moves are good against certain enemies, right? But you don't always have those moves when you first confront the enemies. So throughout, like, every single playthrough, you are going to be, like, unarmed, with, like, basic punches and kicks, and, like, slowly get more powerful throughout. And the game is so short that you, like, rapidly gain new powers. It's addicting. And honestly, it's a structure that I wish more beat 'em ups adopted. Like, it's like one of my favorite, like, level up mechanics in any game ever. Is just how satisfying it is to see Billy get more and more powerful and, like, unleash more and more moves, like unlocking the spinning roundhouse kick, and, like, getting the hair grab and, like, the elbow. Like, that's actually one of the interesting things about this playthrough, is that, like, this is the playthrough where I realized how good the elbow actually is, because you can beat a Bobos in, like, 4 hits with one. So timing it perfectly, they'll dodge it sometimes. It's essential to, like, clearing these rooms full of Bobos, like, fairly quickly, and it's just oh so satisfying. And honestly, like, a part of me feels like I still don't know everything there is to know about every single move in the game. Like, because I kind of defaulted to, like, what works, and it might not actually be the best. Like that's kind of my feeling, like, playing this game, and like, I think there is room for improvement. Like, obviously I do need to get to the point where, like, I never die on a single play, like, on a playthrough. I need to get to the point where, like, I know how to, like, beat Jimmy Lee without having to, like, have an extra life. Like, I still have quite a lot of growth to do in this game, and I'm sure I will be coming back to it regularly. Just like I have been coming back to Ninja Gaiden regularly after I beat that. But, like, it's very interesting, like, being at that point where I'm kind of at the precipice, and I'm kind of at the point where, like, I can consistently get through all of Double Dragon. It's just something that, like, I've been building up to, like, my entire gaming career. This is something that, like, I've always wanted to do. Like, I have beaten this game before, but I believe I use save states, which is why I was, like, struggling so much with this playthrough. But, like, going through it legit, it is true. Save states absolutely ruin classic gaming. And we really do need to, like, start emphasizing that a lot to, like, younger players, because I imagine that's a major reason why games like this don't get appreciated the way they do, because all anybody does to get through these games is just save state and then, like, or rewind or something to, like, recover from the mistakes, instead of, like, actually learning and actually, like, going through the way it was intended. Because when you go through it, like, properly, you really start to understand the game's unique appeal and just why it was such a classic when it first released. It's definitely something I've been thinking about a lot lately, because, without the save states or the rewind feature, people probably wouldn't play these games at all, right? But, like, at the same time, they do lead you to kind of lose something in it, and like, it's so frustrating seeing, like, younger people try and say, like, oh, I beat Double Dragon by using save states and rewind. It's not that hard. I'm just like, you didn't beat the game. Like, it's not that hard. It's not that complicated of a subject, and yet, certain people just don't want to admit it, because they just want to, like, get through this game just to say they did it, just to say it was disappointing, and that they prefer, like, Skyrim or whatever. And this is a game that I think has kind of surpassed Skyrim's legacy. This is a game that's, like, better, I think, than, like, something like Elden Ring or Baldur's Gate 3. Like, this is a real Nintendo classic, and it's something that I wish got a lot more attention from a lot of people. I'm not sure what the future has in store for Double Dragon, because, I've been complaining about a lot of these Double Dragon sequels and reboots and, like, the remakes and all that. Like, it feels like Double Dragon is kind of a mishandled IP. They should be something that's, like, an iconic beat 'em up series, something that, like, kind of defined the genre. But at a certain point, it was replaced by, like, Final Fight, by Streets of Rage, by TMNT, and, like, for some reason, it just never really established itself as an iconic brand, and that is really, really, really shameful. Like, this really is something that I think should be considered, like, one of the all-time greatest Nintendo games. Like, maybe it is among some circles. I honestly do feel like I have more fun playing through the game than I do, like, something like, say, Punch-Out or Zelda 2 or, like, Super Mario Bros. 2 or 3. Like, playing this, I enjoy this, like, quite a bit more than most games on the NES library. And it's just, to me, I just feel like it really should be, like, more highly rated than it is. Like, this is something that I think kind of stands the test of time as, like, an all-time goated Nintendo game. And it just feels like it just doesn't get that kind of attention. It's so strange to me seeing people put, like, Super Mario Bros. 3 or the original Metroid on pedestals, when, like, I feel like they haven't aged all that well. But then you have games like this, which I think are better in a lot of ways, and, like, nobody really talks about them as much. It's just, it is very frustrating. It is very sad, and I hope someday that there is some kind of return. Like, I do hope that at some point that, like, we do get, like, a really good, like, revival of Double Dragon that really brings it back to its glory days, that really kind of establishes itself as a titan of the gaming industry. And, like, at this stage, I just don't see it happening. like I just feel like there's no interest, not from the developers, not from the fan base, not from like gamers in general. Like, something like this just feels like it's stuck in the past, and that's kind of what makes it great. At the same time, even though we never got sequels or good sequels, like, at the same time, like it's not an IP that's fallen off either. It never had a fall from grace like, Metal Gear Solid did. We can look back on like Double Dragon fondly without having to point out that like, well, Metal Gear Solid 2 was great. Like, Double Dragon is just, an iconic game that stands on its own merits, that still really, really appeals to people today, if they give it a chance. So with that being said, one of the things that really surprised me about this, coming back to this, is how much I really enjoy the characters. Billy and Jimmy Lee, the idea that these guys are like, going on this crazy adventure to save their girlfriend Marion from evil thugs, only for Jimmy to reveal that he wants Marion to himself, and then you end up fighting him to death. Iconic video game bullshit. Okay, like I love this ending. It's one of the best ever, in my opinion. Like the fact that they decided, like they had the audacity to do something like this is just kind of like, it's just kind of crazy. Like, the big twist is that like your brother is like the final boss. In the arcade version, what would happen is that like if you were playing 2-player, like you would end up having to fight each other to see who gets to be with Marion. In this one, it presents Jimmy as being like the real ringleader behind everything, which preserves the original intent to a certain extent, but also gives it this weird kind of edge to it, that like Jimmy was completely willing to send gangs of dudes after his brother in a desperate attempt to bag Marion. Like Jimmy was through with being a cuckold, and he decided to put Billy in his place, and it's just it is kind of amazing to see. It's kind of amazing to experience, and like it really makes you like come up with like crazy like ideas about the characters, about their dynamics, about their relationship with one another. I'm kind of joking about the whole cuckold thing, because I think like what's supposed to happen is that like Billy is like Marion's boyfriend in this, and that Jimmy like is like the Luigi who doesn't actually get shit. Like I think that's what happens. That's what's supposed to happen, but like it's kind of fun to joke about stuff like this, because in the arcade version, like Marion can end up with Billy or Jimmy. So like again, like just the fact that like the whole dynamic is kind of messed up, the whole relationship, like, and like it really gets your imagination going about like what's actually happening in this plot. Like there's all these directions it can go in, and they really could have like evolved this in like a fun, interesting way, but I don't know. Like, they never really do, outside of like some snide jokes in like River City Girls 2 or whatever. It is kind of a shame, but like it is kind of nice that like classic NES games can have such like risque material and like push the envelope in ways like this. Like it's just kind of remarkable, honestly. Just how much of an edge this game had. I do really, really appreciate that, and I wish we would see like more things like this going forward. It's something that I feel really gives the game a lot of personality, and really, really makes it stick out from its competition. It's something that I really, really enjoy about it.